The passengers had just settled into their seats, the hum of the engines filling the cabin with a calm rhythm. It was supposed to be an ordinary business flight, but within minutes chaos would shake the entire airline industry. A flight attendant, frustrated and unaware of who she was speaking to, lost her composure, and in a shocking moment, she raised her hand against a passenger. That passenger wasn't just anyone. He was a CEO, a man whose decisions could make or break empires. And within 10 minutes, what happened next would not only bring the flight to a standstill, but would push the entire airline to the edge of collapse. Because sometimes, one mistake in the sky can change everything on the ground. It was a bright morning when Flight 782 prepared for departure from New York to Los Angeles. Business travelers filled the first-class cabin, their laptops open, emails being typed even before takeoff. Among them sat Daniel Carter, a man whose name carried weight in boardrooms around the world. Daniel was the CEO of a fast-rising global tech company, a man who had built his empire from nothing and had become one of the most respected executives in America. Yet despite his towering reputation, Daniel was not the type to flaunt his power. Dressed in a simple tailored suit, he carried no entourage, no assistants. To the outside eye, he looked like just another professional on a morning flight. But to those who knew his story, Daniel was proof that perseverance and discipline could turn impossible odds into success. As the flight attendants moved briskly through the aisle, greeting passengers and helping with luggage, one attendant in particular seemed different. Her name was Samantha, and though she wore the same uniform and smile, her nerves were on edge. She had already worked back-to-back flights, exhaustion tugging at her patience. Each request from a passenger felt heavier than the last. She wanted nothing more than to reach the end of the shift. Daniel quietly observed everything around him: the neatly folded napkins, the clinking of glasses, the tension in Samantha's hurried movements. He believed in treating everyone with respect, regardless of their role. And when Samantha mistakenly dropped a small bottle of water on his tray table, Daniel simply smiled. "It's okay," he said warmly. But Samantha's nerves made her misinterpret his calmness. To her, the smile seemed patronizing, almost mocking, and in that moment, her frustration, fatigue, and pride began to boil. Around them, the other passengers remained unaware that the seeds of an unthinkable confrontation were being planted. For Daniel, this was supposed to be a routine flight, an hour in the sky, a chance to rest before another meeting. For Samantha, it was another long day of being undervalued and overlooked. Neither knew that in just a few minutes, the tension between them would erupt into a single shocking act, one that would not only change their lives, but ripple across the entire airline industry. The plane soared smoothly above the clouds, meal service had just begun, and the atmosphere inside the cabin was calm. Passengers were flipping through magazines, some were half asleep, and a few were discussing their business deals in hushed voices. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but beneath the surface, an unseen storm was quietly gathering strength. Samantha, the flight attendant, moved down the aisle with a forced smile. Every clink of a glass, every "excuse me, miss," grated on her already frayed nerves. She had been working 12-hour shifts for days, and her patience was running dangerously low. Her exhaustion wasn't just physical, it was emotional. She felt invisible, like her years of service in the airline meant nothing. Daniel, seated quietly in first class, noticed her frustration. He wasn't the kind of man who ignored people. He had built his entire career by understanding emotions, reading body language, and treating people with dignity. When Samantha accidentally skipped his meal choice, he gently said, "Excuse me, I think you missed mine." His tone was polite, but in Samantha's ears it sounded like criticism. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and though she forced a smile, inside she felt her pride flare. "You'll have to wait," she replied curtly, brushing past him. A few nearby passengers raised their eyebrows, surprised at her tone. Daniel, however, remained calm. He had no idea that this small exchange would ignite something much bigger. As the minutes passed, Samantha's agitation only grew. A passenger a few rows back spilled juice, another asked for an extra blanket, and yet another complained about the Wi-Fi not working. Each request felt like an attack, each voice echoing in her head. And when she finally returned to Daniel with his meal, she placed the tray down with more force than necessary, the dishes rattling, looked up at her and said softly, "Rough day?" His words carried empathy, but to Samantha, they felt like a spotlight on her weakness. Something inside her snapped. Passengers in the nearby rows watched in stunned silence as Samantha's face hardened. She leaned closer, her voice sharp. "Don't talk down to me." And before anyone could react, her hand struck across Daniel's face. The sound echoed in the hushed cabin. A collective gasp spread through the aisle. Forks froze mid-air. Conversations died instantly, and the only sound was the steady hum of the engines. Daniel didn't move. He didn't shout. He simply sat still, his eyes locked on Samantha with a calm but piercing gaze. That silence, his refusal to react, was more powerful than any words. Other passengers began whispering, some fumbling for their phones, recording what had just happened. Within seconds, news of the slap was already making its way into the digital world. But no one yet realized that this wasn't just a shocking incident. It was the spark that would set off an explosive chain of events. The countdown to the airline's implosion had begun. The cabin was frozen in silence. For a few seconds, no one breathed. The slap had landed not just on the CEO's face, it had landed on the dignity of every passenger watching, on the reputation of the airline, and most of all, on the fragile thread holding Samantha's career together. Daniel, still seated, touched his cheek slowly. He didn't raise his voice, didn't shout, didn't threaten. Instead, he looked at Samantha with eyes so calm, so controlled, that it unsettled everyone more than an outburst ever could. His silence carried the weight of a storm that had not yet broken. Passengers began whispering louder now. Phones were raised. Some gasped. Did she really just do that? She slapped him? A passenger? No, she slapped him. Do you know who that is? That's Daniel Carter, the CEO. Samantha's breathing grew heavy, her chest rising and falling as if she herself couldn't believe what she had done. Her hand trembled at her side, and for the first time, fear replaced her anger. One of her colleagues rushed forward, whispering urgently, "Samantha, what are you doing? Do you realize?" But Samantha brushed her off, still burning with pride. "He disrespected me," she muttered, though her voice cracked, betraying her doubt. Daniel finally spoke. His voice was low, calm, but carried across the cabin like a bell. "I did not disrespect you, but now the world will see who disrespected themselves." The words cut deeper than a shout ever could. By now, half the cabin was recording. The videos captured not just the slap, but Daniel's measured composure, his refusal to retaliate. Within minutes, those recordings were uploaded mid-flight through onboard Wi-Fi, spreading like wildfire on social media. The hashtags began trending. Number Flight 782, number Slapgate, number Respect. In the sky, news outlets picked it up even before the plane landed. CEO assaulted by flight attendant mid-flight. The headlines screamed across screens in airports worldwide. The airline's board of directors, watching in horror, realized their worst nightmare was unfolding live before the public. Back on the plane, the captain himself came to Daniel's seat, his face pale. "Mr. Carter, please accept our deepest apologies. This will be addressed immediately." But Daniel only shook his head. "It's not me who needs the apology. It's every passenger who believes respect still matters." Samantha now felt the walls closing in. Every camera, every eye, every whisper became a weight pressing down on her. She tried to defend herself, stammering, I didn't mean... He looked at me like... But no one listened. Her words dissolved into the roar of public judgment already forming outside the plane. By the time Flight 782 landed, police officers, journalists, and airline executives were waiting at the gate. Samantha was escorted off the aircraft, her once proud uniform now a symbol of disgrace. She covered her face, but it was too late. The world had seen. And as Daniel exited calmly, flashes of cameras surrounded him. Reporters shouted questions. Will you sue? Will you demand compensation? Is this the end of the airline? Daniel paused, his voice steady. I don't need revenge. The truth is already enough. Those words spread faster than the slap itself. Investors began pulling out, customers canceled bookings, and within days, the airline's stock crashed. What had begun as one woman's moment of frustration now spiraled into a storm that threatened to implode the entire airline industry. And all because one man chose silence over anger and let the world judge for itself. The days that followed felt like years for the airline. What was once a proud symbol of luxury travel now became the center of ridicule, anger, and boycotts. Every post, social media, every headline repeated the same truth. A flight attendant slapped a CEO, and the airline let it happen. Board meetings turned into battlefields. Investors demanded answers, employees feared layoffs, and passengers vowed never to book again. The brand, built over decades, was now collapsing in mere days. One mistake had exposed cracks that could no longer be hidden, and at the center of it all was Daniel Carter. Reporters camped outside his office, waiting for him to announce lawsuits or revenge. But when he finally appeared, his words silenced the frenzy. I don't want this to be about punishment, he said. This is not just about me. This is about how we treat one another, no matter who we are, where we sit, or what position we hold. Respect is not a privilege. It's the minimum we owe each other. Those words struck deeper than any court ruling ever could. Daniel's calmness made him not just a CEO, but a voice for millions who had faced humiliation in silence. Samantha, meanwhile, sat alone in her small apartment. The uniform that once gave her pride now hung lifeless in the corner. She replayed the moment again and again in her mind, the instant she let anger control her, the instant she forgot that every passenger, every human, deserves dignity. She wished she could take it back, but the world had already judged. The airline, desperate to repair its reputation, issued public apologies, offered refunds, even fired entire management teams. But nothing worked. Trust, once broken, is the hardest thing to rebuild. Within weeks, the company's future hung by a thread. Yet Daniel didn't rejoice in their downfall. He didn't smile as their empire crumbled. Instead, he carried the same quiet sadness he felt on that plane. Because he knew this wasn't just the story of an airline, it was the story of what happens when we let pride win over patience, when respect is forgotten at 30,000 feet in the sky. As the cameras followed him one last time, a journalist asked, Mr. Carter, do you think this airline deserves to survive? Daniel paused. His answer was simple, yet unforgettable. Everyone deserves a second chance, but only if they learn from the first. And with that, he walked away. Not as a victim, not as a man seeking revenge, but as a leader who had reminded the world of something far more valuable than money or power, the priceless weight of respect.